Hello, good day guys. So this will be your Unit 6 lesson. So this is all about network installation and configuration. So for this lesson, I'll be giving you a guide on deploying networks or implementing networks. So what are the guidelines on uh, how you connect your computers over the network? So what are the things you have to consider on implementing or designing networks? So these are just some of the guidelines and also some of the terms used in networking. Okay, so I'll be starting with my PowerPoint presentation. So this is Unit 6. Okay, so this is Unit 6. So this is all about network installation and configuration. So this unit discusses the considerations and guidelines in implementing a local area network. So this also explains terms relating to networking. So I'll be giving you some few guides on implementing networks. So there are things you have to consider when you are implementing networks. Okay. So the first thing that we have to consider is the network cable installation. So these are the guidelines on cabling. So always remember that there are guidelines na dapat nyo sundan for network cable installation. So the first one is try to avoid running cables parallel to power cables. Always remember that parallel cables produces EMI, or the electromagnetic interference. So the electromagnetic interference something can cause problem to your network data transmission. So as much as possible, if you have a power cable, wag nyo isasama yung power cable on the installation. Okay? Or yung isasama nyo sa pagkakalinya. Do not make it parallel to power cables. So as much as possible, look for other path para ilay nyo yung cable. Okay? To lay your cable on a different path as much as possible to avoid the electromagnetic interferences produced by the power cables. Okay? So next is avoid bending cables to the extent that it exceeds a 90 degrees angle. So as much as possible, do not bend the cables as much as possible on a 90 degrees, because there's a possibility that the wires may be cut here. Okay? So baka maputol siya on this particular point since you bend it on 90 degrees, or as much as possible. If not exactly 90 degrees, for example, you need to you really need to bend the cable, but as much as possible you have somehow hindi masyadong pointed tong pagkakaliko nito. Okay? So avoid bending cables to the extent that it exceeds 90 degrees angle. Okay, if you bundle a group of cables together with cable ties, do not overkinch them. You should overkinch them. You should be able to turn the tie with fingers. So as much as possible, if you have a bunch of cable, so wag nyo daw masyadong higpitan yung pagkaka-cable tie, because baka masyadong mayupi yung copper dito or the cable dito. So there's a possibility na medyo magkaroon ng problema ka on the twisted pair inside your Cat5 cable. Okay, so always remember, as much as possible, you can still rotate the cable tie with your fingers. Okay, so not necessarily you can insert the finger, but you have to make sure that namumove mo pa yung cable tie. So para kahit paano hindi masyado naiipit yung cables. Okay? So number 4 is keep cables away from devices which can introduce noise into them. Here's a short list. So copier machines, electric heaters, speakers, printers, TV sets, fluorescent light copiers, welding machines, microwave ovens, telephones, fans, elevators, motors, electric ovens, dryers, washing machines, and shop equipments. Okay, so keep your cables away from those devices because just like with power cables, so those devices sometimes they produce RFI, or the radio frequency interference. So most of these devices produces the RFI, or the radio frequency interference. Okay, so that may have an effect on your data transmission. So as much as possible, yung cable nyo daw is ilayo nyo on those devices. Okay, so next is avoid stretching UTP cables. So tension when pulling cable should not exceed 25 pounds. Okay, so always remember that do not overstretch your cable. So masyado siyang batak. So kahit pa paano, you have to have meron kang hindi masyadong batak yung cable mo. So para kahit pa paano, hindi there's no possibility of putting so much stress on especially on inside the wire or the twisted pair. So basically, kung masyadong hatak, there's a possibility na maputol up some of the twisted pair there. Always remember, do not stretch cable. Okay, so yan. So that's another guide. So next is minimizing twisting of the cable jackets. If you twist them too much, the jacket may tear. Okay, so wag nyo daw pipihitin yung jacket. So always remember, if you're laying cables, as much as possible, straighten the cable. The jacket is the coating of the entire wire. So ito yung outer portion of the Cat5. So yung jacket is the outer portion of the Cat5 or the cable. So wag nyo siyang iti-twist para kahit pa paano it does not have tension to the cable itself. Okay, next one is do not use stapler to secure UTP cables. Use telephone wires, coaxial wire hangers, which are available at most hardware stores, or you can use mga clamps. So yung mga C clamps. So yung mga C clamps para doon may papasok yung mga cables. Okay, or the clamps, or the telephone wire, or RJ6 or RJ6 coaxial wire hangers, or yung mga C-clamps na tinatawag. So, sa mga hardware, may mabibili kayo niyan. So, do not use stapler kasi yung stapler, if this is your wire, lalagyan yung stapler dito, there's a possibility na magkaroon ng tension here, and pwede maputol yung mga wires inside. Okay, so, as much as possible, do not use stapler or yung mga gun tackers. Okay? Okay, next is when installing cables on long distances, be sure to leave ample slack. Remember, a few feet of extra cables is a small price to pay to avoid having to redo a cable run because of problems caused by stretched cable. Okay, so always remember that when you are installing on long distances, always remember to have enough extra cable para kahit paano meron kang meron kang extra, or meron kang mahirap yung saktuhan naman kasi yes, you can connect, you can extend cables kung halimbawa maputol, pwede mo siya dugtungan ulit, but kaya lang as much as possible, we limit yung mga dugtong on computer cables or network cables, para kasi the more you have na mga dugtong on the network, so basically there are greater chances of fault on the network. So always remember that when you are deploying cables on long distances, just have extra cables on cable length on the entire cable run. Okay, so ibig sabihin, lagyan nyo naman ng allotment for extension. Okay, so para yung possibility na baka mamaya you run this particular cable, malayo pala yung kakabitan na network, so kukulangin ka. So it's better to have extra on the cable run kaysa yung kulangin ka. Okay? So that's the next guide. Okay, next also consider signal degradation. So degradation sources can be internal or external. So the first one, we have attenuation, or when signal degrade over distance. So, ito yung mihina na yung signal over distance. So, remember that, especially for Cat5, basically, there's a limitation of 100 meters. So, when you extend 100 meters, mark on your cable, so mawawala ka na ng signal. So, that is what we call attenuation. Because the maximum transmission for that copper alone has something has a specific distance. So ibig sabihin meron siyang distance na on transmitting data. So that is what we call attenuation. Habang humahaba yung kable, mas humihina yung signal. Okay? So but on Cat 5, the maximum signal is 100 meters. Okay? But sometimes in reality, we've tried extending on a longer cable exceeding 100 meters. So, minsan magkakaroon, pero that's a problem when you extend 100 meters. Minsan magkakaroon, tapos mapuputol-putol na siya. So, basically, because of the attenuation, the signal degrades over distance. Okay, so that is attenuation. Next, we have the EMI, or the electromagnetic interference. So, as just like I discussed earlier, so sa mga electrical power source, so usually they produces electromagnetic interference. Okay, so the next one is the RFI, or the radio frequency interference. So just like with your guide on your network cabling, so always remember that most appliances produces radio frequency interference. So like photocopiers, microwave ovens, refrigerators, so those produces radio frequency interference. So always remember na ilayo nyo yung network cables nyo on something that produces EMI and RFI. Okay? So ways to reduce EMI or RFI network cabling. So keep network media away from sources of EMI. So always remember, remove all install cables away from those sources. So ensure that network media installed properly. Use shielded cabling. So you can use shielded cabling. So kaya sa network cabling sa mga buildings, usually nalagay pa siya sa mga tubo or mga cable trays, yung mga PVC pipes, para naka-shield siya, para as much as possible it is protected from the electromagnetic interference or the radio frequency interference. Okay, use repeaters if it is not possible na halimbawa yung deployment exceeds 100 meters. Always remember, use repeaters. So an example of a repeater is a switch. So if you're going to exceed 100 meters, you can place a switch in between. Okay, for example, this one, if this is 150 meters, this is your source and this will be your destination. So since this is 100 meters apart, so you can cut in the middle, then you can use a repeater or hub or a switch, okay, para palakasin uli yung signal here, okay, because there's an attenuation exceeding 100 meters, so you have to make sure that there's a repeating device to repeat the signal again para makapunta siya on your destination. So use repeaters, so you can use switch to extend network. Okay, ensure that you install high quality cable. So always remember that syempre, especially for sensitive data or sensitive deployment, so always make sure to use high quality cables. So there are several brands na magaganda like Broadband, T-Link, and iba-iba pa, Alantech na cables. So those are the different brands which are popular in networking. So basically, you can use those high quality cables, especially pag sa mga building deployment. So always make sure to use mga branded cables. Okay. So when it comes to Windows network or networking computers on a Windows environment, so always make sure that computer name is configured properly. Computers having names that violate Windows guidelines may, for various technical reasons, fail to network with their peers on the LAN. So always remember, there are guidelines on how you name your computers on the network. So these are several guides. So ensure your computers are named appropriately according to the following rules. So number one is no two computers can possess the same computer name. Ensure all computer names are unique. So always remember that on a network, so always remember that there should be no the same computer name on the network. Okay? So same with the IP address, there should be unique IP addresses for each computer on the network. Okay, number two, ensure each computer name is no longer than 15 characters. In Windows operating systems, so basically, the acceptable length of computer name is no longer than 15 characters. Okay? So when you exceed that one, parang pinuputo lang naman niya yung computer name. But just to be safe and to make sure that you name the computer properly, so make sure that it does not exceed 15 characters. Okay, so number three, ensure no computer name contains spaces. So basically, I think it's not accepted when you configure computer name with spaces. Next is avoid special characters in computer names whenever possible. Do not use any of these characters when naming Windows computers. Okay, as much as possible, just stick with characters, or you can, but I think the character that is only allowed is the dash. Okay, so just use as much as possible, avoid special characters in your computer name. Okay, avoid using lowercase letters in a computer name whenever possible. So older versions of Microsoft Windows Server treat computer names are as case sensitive. Entering computer names in all uppercase is recommended to avoid possible name conflicts that would prevent Windows computers from identifying each other. So always remember that do not use lowercase. As much as possible, when you are deploying computers on the network, so make sure that you name the computer name in capital. Okay, so in all caps daw, para because some of the older version of Windows does not recognize some Windows operating systems are case sensitive. For just to be safe and also para standard na din, so always make sure to name your computer on the network using uppercase letters. Okay, so we have the local area network standards. And by the way, okay, so by the way, especially on your computer network, siyempre, if you're going to deploy it on an organization, so kami as a practice, so ang ginagawa namin, for example, if the computer name belongs to the accounting office, so an example is, ninaname namin siya as A, C, C, T, G, then the dash, for example, and the user. So, for example, I'm the user that is James. So, that's accounting dash James. For example, kung sa IT, so I can name it as IT dash, for example, Rio. Okay? So, para kahit paano, when you are naming computers over the network, you identify the office and the user. Okay? So, just to be organized in terms of computer names on the network, so you can include the office, then followed by dash, then the name of the user. Okay? So, those are the guidelines on naming computers on the network. Okay, so we have local area network standards. So, sa local area network standards, so as what I mentioned that there are different network standards for networking. So, network standards define guidelines that specify the way computer access the medium to which they are attached. So, the guidelines also describe the type of medium, the speeds up used on different type of physical cable or wireless technology. Okay, so the well-known standards adopted by the IEEE are the 802 standards. Sa mga networking, so 802 has been the standards. Okay, so these are the standards. So these are set by the the IEEE, or the Institute of Electronics and Electrical Engineers. Okay, so that is the Institute of Electronics and Electrical Engineers. Okay, so those are the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics and Electrical Engineer. Okay. Okay, so there are several standards under 802. So we have the 802.3, we have the 802.7, we have the 802.8, we have the 802.11. Okay, so the 802.3 is what we call as the Ethernet LAN. So Ethernet LAN refers to the physical cabling, while the way data is transmitted through the cable is called the carrier sense multiple access collision detection. Okay, yung 802.3 daw ay ang tinatawag nating standard is the Ethernet. Ito yung mga network interface card, Cat5, RJ45 switches. So basically, this is what we call as an Ethernet LAN. Okay? So, ang ginagamit daw niya is the CSMA access collision detection. So, actually, I'll be discussing that on other topics about the CSMA collision detection. So, this method of transmission requires that only one device on the network can be transmitted at a time. If another device can sense that the transmission is already in the cable, it will have to wait. So, always remember that if you have computer networks, computers can send there's a possibility that two or more computers can send on the network on a very same time. So, nangyayari kasi doon, if that will be the case, ang mangyayari is magbabanggaan lang yung data nyo. Okay? So, there will be no data transmissions if that happens. Okay? So, with the CSMA/collision detection, so it allows transmissions and prevents collision on the network. Yung pagbabangga ng data natin on a specific time is what we call as the collision. Okay? So, yung pagbabangga ng data natin is what we call as the collision. So, ibig sabihin, there may be two or more computers which are sending data at the very same time. Okay? So, if they send data at the very same time, so it causes collision. Okay? If there will be collision, there will be no data transmission. So, to avoid that, the carrier sense multiple access/CD makes it possible that device will transmit one at a time. If another device can sense that the transmission is already in the cable, it will have to wait, okay, to avoid collision. Okay, so that is the CSMA/collision detection. Okay. So we have the 802.7 broadband LAN. So this 802.7 standard provides specification for the design, installation, and testing needed for broadband transmission. Yung tinatawag na broadband is allowing multiple data on a single transmission. Okay, it allows multiple data on a single transmission. So, ano ba yung tinatawag na ganito? So, on a local area network, so may tinatawag na broadband modem. So, the broadband modem, for example, so transmit, let's say, meron kang phone. So, this is your phone and you have your data. Okay? So, basically, this is what we call as a broadband because on a single cable, basically, you can have your telephone, you can have your internet service, okay, or the telephone service and the network service or internet service all on a single data transmission. Okay, so same as well with your wireless broadband. So basically, kaya siya tinawag na wireless broadband because it allows multiple types of transmission. We have the 3G, 4G, the 5G. So basically, those are the different transmission, and even your cell phones can be considered as has a broadband wireless. So basically, because it can transmit on different speeds and different types of data. Okay, so that is what we call the 802.7 broadband. Okay, so we have the 802.8. So this refers to fiber optic LAN or unmanned. Okay, or fiber optics. Okay, so for fiber optics networks, so this is what we call as the 802.8. Okay, so this refers to fiber optic networks, the 802.8. Okay, next is we have the 802.11. So that is for wireless LAN. So these are for wireless computers or clients. Okay, you can have an access points para lahat ng mga wireless device nyo. Wireless device connects to your access points. Okay, so that is what we call the 802.11. That is for wireless networks. Okay, that is for wireless networks. And usually 802.11 standard uses the following frequency. So the 2.4 GHz and the 5 GHz. Okay? Kaya nga may tinatawag na dual band routers. Okay? Kasi yung mga luma only operates on the 2.4. So yung mga bago ngayon on a 5 GHz. Okay? So kaya siya tinawag na dual band. It's because your access point or your wireless device can operate on a 2.4 and a 5 GHz 802.11 standard. Okay? So, yun yun. So, we have the dual band, the 2.4 and the 5 GHz. Okay, so when designing network, you also have to consider IP addressing. Okay? So, I think nagawa niyo naman on your previous laboratory. So, there are 3 ways to assign IP address to computers. Okay, number 1 is through static addressing. So, this is the manual way of assigning IP. So, basically, yun yung mga first activity nyo. You design network, a simple network on the Cisco Packet Tracer, and you are assigning static IP address or manual IP addressing. Okay? So, baka, kaya lang, the problem with static addressing or manual addressing is that medyo matrabaho siya. Kasi imagine nyo, if you have 1,000 computers, you have to memorize each IP addresses for a specific computer. Okay? So, to solve that problem, we have the DHCP. So, from your previous activity also, so, we have our server, which acts as a DHCP server. So basically, the DHCP server is the one responsible for automatically assigning IP addresses to computers. Okay? That saves time on assigning IP address to computers. Always remember that IP address is very important on networks. Okay? So, hindi pa pwedeng mag-work ang computer without IP address. Okay? So, DHCP, so yung previous activity nyo, lab activity nyo, you created a simple network with a server which acts as a DHCP server or the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol server which provides IP to your network. Okay, so that's why your computer is configured on a DHCP mode. So automatically, the computer will only get the IP on the DHCP server. Okay? So next, we have also the APIPA or the Automatic Private IP Addressing. Okay, ano ba yung APIPA? And by the way, yung static IP addressing, ginagawa lang yan usually sa mga servers. Kasi static IP server should have static IP. Kasi computers connect to a server. Diba? Kaya nga siya tinawag na server because there is a service being acquired by clients, okay, or computers on the network. So, kung mababago-bago yung IP niya, there's a possibility na hindi siya makakonect on the network because your network knows a particular IP on a particular server. So, for servers, always remember that you assign static IP address. Okay? So, this is DHCP. So, na-discuss ko naman niya. So, the DHCP server automatically provides IP address to the network. We have also the APIPA. So, yeah, APIPA is the Automatic Private IP Addressing. So, basically, the APIPA is the Automatic Private IP Addressing. So, meaning to say, even though you don't have the DHCP server, once you connect it on the network, your computer on the network, So the Windows operating system automatically configures IP addressing. Okay? So it is still possible that you don't assign static IP, you don't have a DHCP server, but you can still network computers. Because Windows operating system is the one responsible for assigning the APIPA or the automatic private IP addressing. And usually that is a class B IP address 169.254.0.0 to 169.254.255.255 to the client when the server is either permanently or temporarily. So ibig sabihin, if you don't have a DHCP server, automatically the operating system gives the 169 IP address to your computers. So that is what we call as the APIPA. Okay? So we have the public versus private IP addressing. So public means that the IP address can be visited from any computer in the world. So lahat ng websites uses public IP. Okay? You cannot host or make a website which is visible on the internet if you don't have public IP. Okay? So those are websites or websites resides on the web servers. Web servers should have public IP addresses. Okay? Public IP addresses because they should be visible on the internet. Kasi you need to connect to the website. Okay, you have to make it in public, so you have to have a public IP. So, yun yung public IP. So we have the private IP also. So it can be used on private means the IP address can only be used by those on the same network. Okay? So sa mga local area network, that is what ang ginagamit doon is a private IP. So your network only your network or device or computers or hosts on the network are only visible to one another on the internal network. Okay? So you can use the private IP like yung mga 192.168.1.1, 1.2.3.4.5. So those are 5 private IP addresses, and that restricts your network to your internal network. Okay? Or connectivity within your internal network. Okay? So if you don't have the need to communicate to other outside the internet, so basically your network uses private IP address. Okay? We have the shared and versus dedicated IP. Okay, shared means connections are shared with others or the committed information rate. Okay? So we also have the dedicated IP. So ano ba pinakaiba nun? So yung mga DSL na sa mga bahay, those are shared networks. Okay? Or shared IP addresses. So meaning to say, you are just sharing a particular IP over the network. Okay? So if that internet has an IP address, may IP address siya, this is connected to a router, and basically there are so many users which shares the same line. Okay? That's why on a shared DSL or network or shared IP address, there's a possibility that you cannot get the actual upload speed na ginagawa na or the download and the upload speed na binibigay ng internet provider. Kasi sa DSL, you are shared. Ibig sabihin, you are just sharing a line on a particular IP. Okay? Marami kayo nag-share. So if you are sharing resources, syempre there's a possibility that another user is using much more than what you are using on a particular time. Okay? Mas marami yung ginagamit niyang resource on the network compared to you. So that's why hindi nyo nakukuha yung actual upload and download speed on your network. So that is what we call the committed information rate. So basically, ito na yung maximum. This may be the maximum speed, pero there's a possibility na bumaba siya. Okay? Because you are shared with the network. Your speed depends on how the computers on the network on the shared resource is being utilized or on a particular time. Okay? Unlike with the dedicated, so dedicated IP is that you own that IP address. Okay? So you connect directly from outside of the internet and you use it as your resource. If this is a dedicated IP, it means that you are using the network resource alone. So meaning to say, this computer is dedicated to use this specific IP address. Okay, so that's why the download speed and the upload speed is the same. You get the maximum and maximum download and upload speed on a dedicated IP address or internet. Okay? So if you will be given 10 Mbps, basically you have 10 Mbps for download and upload. Okay? So that is the difference between a shared and dedicated IP address. Okay, so we have the packet. So it turns out that everything you do on the internet or network involves packet. So everything that you do on the internet or network, so it requires packets. Okay? So just like on your OSI layer, so basically those data, the protocol data units, you added packets, a packet header. So those are packets also. So those are data on the network, and that is what we call as packet. So that's why in Cisco that is called Cisco Packet Tracer. How do your data is being transmitted over the network. Okay, we have also the media access control or the MAC addresses. So those are physical addresses, unlike IP address, which are logical. Always remember that IP address are logical, while MAC addresses are physical. So ibig sabihin, MAC addresses are fixed or physical addresses of network devices. Okay? So yung logical, pwede natin bago-baguhin yan. The IP addresses can be changed, while the physical address should be intact to the network device. So the reason for this is that your MAC address is actually burnt into the network card's memory chipset. Okay? Meaning to say that every network devices does have MAC addresses or the media access control, because that is the physical identification of those devices on the network. So meaning to say, the network identifies the devices in terms of its physical addresses. Okay? So on the physical level, MAC addresses is very important. Okay? Because that on the physical layer, basically lahat nun requires physical addresses, because we are dealing with electrical signals on the physical layer. So basically, it requires a physical address. Okay? And ulitin ko ulit that MAC addresses are burnt in on the device. Meaning to say, hindi siya dapat na babago. Okay? So this is how the MAC address looks like. So these are the 6 pairs of hexadecimal. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, this is how your MAC addresses looks like. Okay, same also. So that's the Institute of, napag-interchange ko. Yung IEEE is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. Okay, that's Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. Nagkamali yata ako sa pagka-mention kanina. So that's Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineer. Okay? So basically, the IEEE also sets standards for the MAC addresses. Okay? So it is divided into two. The first half is to identify the vendor. The first half is to identify para sa vendor or it's a manufacturer. The second half is for the serial number of the device. Okay? So in this example, so the vendor code is specified by RFC 1700. I'll be discussing RFC on other topics. The MAC addresses is burnt into the network card, so it is fixed. Okay? It is fixed. So this is if this is your entire MAC address, so this is the first half or the first 3 pairs of on the MAC address that is for the vendor identification. I mean to say there are MAC addresses which are assigned to a specific vendor. Let's say kung ikaw ay manufacturer na D-Link, you have sets of, for example, you have sets of MAC addresses or the first half of the MAC addresses na naka-assign sa'yo, sa D-Link. Okay? So basically, so from the first 3, pwede mo na malaman kung kanino manufacturer yon. Okay? So that is the first half for the vendor, and this is the device MAC address. This is for the device na ina-assign na nung manufacturer or nung vendor. Okay? So the manufacturer or the vendor. Ulitin ko ulit, the first half is for the vendor and the second half is for the device. Okay? So the vendor assigns the MAC addresses for the device on its second half. Okay? Okay, we have also the term network address translation. Okay, network address translation is the process where a network device, usually a firewall or a router, assigns a public address to a computer inside a private network. The main use of NAT is to limit the number of public IP addresses an organization or company must use for both economy and security purposes. Okay? So, basically, kasi, technically, if you need to connect computers on the network, so, mangyayari kasi is, if you need to connect computers on the network, kung gusto mo magka-internet, kailangan mo talaga may IP address. Okay? Kaya lang, if you're going to provide public IP on your computer alone, so basically sayang lang kasi you can only use one public IP for a particular computer. Okay? So this public IP is visible on the internet. Okay? One problem with this one is you make this computer accessible to the internet. Remember that you are just a client on the internet. Hindi naman siya web server. Okay, the public IP makes your computer visible over the internet. Okay, so without having security configurations on your computer, so basically it may be at risk even though you are just a client. Okay, remember you are not a web server. Okay, so you don't need to make it public. Okay, you are just getting access to web servers on the internet. Okay? So that is the one function of the network address translation. So instead of connecting your IP on a single public IP, so ginagawa niya is if your device is here, so ginagawa niya visible yung public IP over the network, connect it to the router, then use a private IP. So use a private IP on your computer. Basically, you are using a private IP. Connect it here. Okay? So if you're going to use private IP without a router here, basically you cannot have service over the internet. Remember, you need to have connection to the internet. Okay? So for you to be able to have that one, you have to have a public IP. Okay? So what we're going to do is you connect the private IP to a router, and the router does have the public IP here. Okay? So, yung tinatawag na network address translation is that it translates. Kaya siya tinawag na translation is because it translates public IP to private IP. So, access ka from your private, lalabas siya sa router, naging public siya because you need to use a public IP to connect to the internet. Papasok siya dito, kukonect siya dito sa router, papasok siya dito sa private IP. So that is what we call as the network address translation. It translates your public IP to your private IP address. Okay? So aside also from that na it hides your private your identity over the network because you are not directly connected to the internet or to the public IP or to the public IP. It allows you to connect multiple computers on a private network. So it allows you to connect more computers on the network just by using a single IP. Kasi di ba, if that will be the case on networking, na lahat ng computers naka-public IP, unang-una pa lang is, ang magiging problem natin is maubusan na tayo ng IPv4 or the IP address. That's one problem. Okay? So, the second problem is, all computers will be at risk. Okay? Even though they are not web servers. So, other computers on the network, on the internet, does not have something to get on your network. Okay? So, if this will be exposed to the internet, so basically, you have to have some more security configurations on your computer. It may be costly on your part because this is exposed to the internet. So that's why the network address translation translate the public to IP, ulitin ko ulit, for the purpose of hiding your identity to the internet. At the same time, it translates public to private IP. At the same time, to add more computers without having to use multiple public IP addresses. So that is the function of the network address translation. Okay? Okay. So on the next fewer slides, so this is just basic of LAN configuration. Okay? So ito lang naman. So we have the internet. The internet connects to the router. I think this is the setup sa mga bahay-bahay lang. So, iba lang, internet, then router, then to the workstation. Okay? Sa mga bahay nyo, definitely, most probably, ganito yung setup. For a larger network, use a switch, then connect to different nodes. Okay? So, basically, yan yung ginawa nyo on your earlier network design on Cisco Packet Tracer, or simple network design on your Cisco Packet Tracer. Okay? So, in this diagram, so you have your network. Then, ginagawa nyo, this is a workgroup network. So, basically, you connect a printer on a PC, and this is a shared resource over your network. Okay? So, just like your last activity for Windows network configuration, so you share network printer. Okay? So, you share this printer which is connected to this computer to the other computers. Para tong computer na to, automatically mag-print na lang siya directly to this printer using the network resource. Okay? So, connecting a simple cable modem to the work group. So, you have the network, you have a shared printer or resource. So, if you want to have an internet, so you have the telecom modem or router. So, this is connected to the internet, connect it to your switch, you have your internet connectivity. Okay? So, with this setup, the cable modem or router or the telecom routers, you have the 5-port switch, connect it to the computer, you have the shared resources here, so you can add an access point. So, basically, add the access point to your switch, then the laptop connects to the access point. Okay, so you're going to do other activity using wireless access points for your network design in Cisco Packet Tracer. Okay, or you can use, so instead of using a wired network hub or network switch, you can use a wireless router. So basically, connect your computer to your router. Di ba yung mga routers nyo, mostly mga wireless router naman siya. So you have your LAN. Then Then you have the shared resource. Then your wireless router acts as your access point, and it connects to, and your wireless network devices connects to the wireless router. Those are the simple LAN implementation. Okay? So that is the basic guide on network installation. So basically, ito na yung mga guides na dapat nyo sundin when you are connecting cables, connecting networks. Okay? At the same time, also yung mga last slides are the basic network implementation or simple network configuration. Okay, so that will be all for your for Unit 6. So I'll be leaving you with a short quiz about this one. So kindly watch this video, and after this one, I'll be posting the short quiz pertaining to this topic. Okay. Okay, so good night, guys. So I'll be leaving you with this video.